Let's jump to your big board. Probably the biggest news at the top of the draft is that you now have Cam Whitmore as your third overall prospect. He had been five on your big board for most of the season. What led to your final ranking?
So, look, I knew this was going to be a thing when I did it. I have Brandon Miller and Cam Whitmore so close.
Hmm.
Like I have like if we're grading them like on a scale of like 100, right? And like Victor Wembanyama is like 110 or whatever it is, right? In
Yeah.
terms of like prospect, and Scoot's like a 98 or whatever. I would have like Brandon Miller is like a 93 and Cam Whitmore is like a 94 or like a 93 and a half versus 94. I have
Hmm.
them so close. I think they're both really talented players. Frankly, if I was Portland and it came down to Cam Whitmore or Brandon Miller, I would probably take Brandon Miller in their circumstance if my plan is to continue to build around Damian Lillard. If my plan was to completely rebuild and start anew, I would probably take Cam Whitmore. It would be dependent upon what my organizational goals are, because I think that you mix Cam Whitmore with Jeremy Grant, not going to get a whole lot of ball movement. Not going to You're going to get a lot of kind of stagnant offense, especially given the way that Dame plays and the way
Mm-hmm.
that Anthony Simons plays as well. So if you're going to continue to build around that core, I would be concerned about getting the most out of Cam Whitmore. Uh, Whereas with Brandon Miller, I think like you can play him as a floor spacer, you can attack closeouts, you can play him ball screens, you can do some different things. And I just kind of like that fit a little bit better in terms of I feel like we often talk about fit is like this negative thing at the top of the draft. And on some level, it is. I think you should never take at the top of the draft a player that is in a lower tier on your board than somebody that is in a higher tier on your board,
Yeah.
because that guy in the higher tier very clearly has higher upside. But I think there's a lot of room for potential team-based discussion based on what your scheme is, based on what your roster is, based on what your situation is as a team in terms of choosing between guys between tiers, because some guys just fit better in other schemes at the end of the day. And for me, if I was Portland, even though I have Brandon Miller at 4, I think that for the Blazers, if I was creating a draft grade for them, project that might be happening on theathletic.com next week,
Mm.
I would probably have Brandon Miller as more of like a 95 and Cam Whitmore as like a 94. You know what I like? It's
Yeah.
these things are so team specific. We do these things in a vacuum. I do them in a vacuum. And I think that it can often create kind of false narratives in some way. Like I have a giant tier of prospects in my tier 5 from let me take a look here, from number 17 through to number 36. In terms of perception between those two rankings publicly, it is enormous in theory. But to me, like I look at Chris Murray and Max Lewis, who I have 35,
Mm-hmm.
and I see, look, you could take Max Lewis, you could take Chris Murray. Like it just depends on what your organization is building. And the way that I tend to rank my board is dependent upon what my philosophy is, which tends to be I tend to be a little bit higher in that latter portion of the first round on high field guys, guys that can shoot, guys that can defend, guys that can play a role, because the hit rate of stars beyond pick 17, which is where that tier starts, is quite low.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if you wanted to be somebody that has GG Jackson at 17, like fine, cool, I get it. Like if you want to go hunt upside and you think that GG Jackson's upside is that large, I'm here for it. Like whatever you want to do. I think that that ends up being like the misconception of the draft process.
But it
And
sounds like, because going back to the top though, it sounds like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the difference for you between Scoot and maybe Cam Whitmore and Brandon Miller is big enough where if you're Charlotte, you
Wouldn't even
wouldn't
think
be thinking
twice.
about fit anymore. Yeah. Okay.
Wouldn't think twice. I would take
Okay.
Scoot.